Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. Josh Bryant here on Finding My Straight and Narrow Path. Let's go. So today, amazing. So it's been a bit of a crazy day today. And as I was reading through this section today, a lot of things really stuck out to me. And so I'm really hoping that today I can get across the meaning of this idea of the other end of the stick. Essentially, consequences and mistakes. When we make a choice, it leads to a natural consequence. And we're going to dive into that later. But first, I want to go back to the haves and the bees. You know, this idea of if you want to have something, you should focus on being something, right? So, for example, I've been really stressed under just a lot of pressures between school and dating and work and prepping for the summer. Both in my roles as a route expert and as a team leader, it's just been a little overwhelming the past 24 hours, I guess. And not that that's bad or anything, but I was thinking to myself, man, if only I had more time to do everything that I need to do, that would be awesome, you know. And then this section came into my mind, and it was the haves and the bees. You know, I shouldn't wish for more time, but I should rather be a better time manager, right? And so I kind of was thinking about that, and I thought, that's true. A reactive person would definitely say, if only I had more time. But a proactive person would say, I recognize that I have this amount of time, and then if I use that time efficiently, effectively, and wisely, I can get everything done that I need to do in that day. But it's all about having that burning gas inside, being able to manage that time, and also your priorities, which ones are more important than the others, right? And being able to set correct objectives for those and how it ties back in your mission statement, and just being a better time manager or time leader, in all aspects, right? And so that was my shift. And then I got really excited. I went from becoming very stressed and anxious about my day to becoming very excited to see what was, to just see my potential, to see who I was going to be the next 24 hours as I implemented that change. And so that's kind of what I've been thinking about a lot today, at least. And I'm already starting to implement ways to be becoming better at that, such as weekly planning, setting objectives, learning how I study best, questioning my assumptions about certain things. But it's been a really cool experience to kind of think about that, especially on the car ride home today. I was just playing pickleball with some of the boys, and on the way back I was thinking about that, wow, I just have a lot of stuff to do, so I'd have to shoot this podcast episode, plus I haven't read my book today, just a lot of stuff going on. Homework is flooding and it's catching up to me, and I thought, I just need to be better at what I do, just be more consistent and effective, essentially, to find that PPC balance and to do what's most important. And I think I've been getting caught up a lot in other things that just aren't super important. So it's my thought for tonight on the haves and the bees. Moving on to the other end of the stick. This is a really cool concept that has really helped me maintain control of my emotions and of just my life in general. So there are two things that this section kind of talks about. The first one is consequences, and the second one is mistakes, right? And there are different orders of those. So in consequences, you have social consequences and natural consequences. And then mistakes, you have first order mistakes and second order mistakes. So there are these different categories of these two things, right? So we've been talking about this whole idea of entering into your circle of influence, of working on yourself, on your own paradigms and attitudes and behaviors, but mainly paradigms, and how that can create quantum change on your conditions or experiences, or even circumstances, right? So this idea kind of goes into the circle of concern. So consequences and mistakes are in the circle of concern. And essentially what this concept is that although we are free to choose our actions, we are not free to choose the consequences of those actions, right? So our consequences, they're governed by natural law and eternal principles. So like, for example, I could choose to not exercise, but that means I'm going to get fat. I just will. I can choose to jump off a cliff, but then the natural consequence is that I die, right? So, like, and so that's a natural consequence, whereas social consequence is more like the consequence in society. So, for example, if you break like a social norm, then people might like kick you out of the group, right? Like, let's say like you're like dishonest in a business deal and nobody does business with you. Well, it's not really a natural consequence. That's more of a social consequence. The natural consequence would be the damage to your inner character, to your inner identity and self. The natural consequence is you trying to deceive yourself and not harmonize your life with those principles. So principles govern our behavior, and living in harmony with them will bring positive consequences, whereas like breaking yourself against them will bring negative consequences. So we are free to choose our response to any sort of situation, but when we do, we pick up the other end of the stick. So when we pick up let me rephrase that. When we pick up one end of the stick, we pick up the other end of the stick. So the natural consequences, right? Now, there are times when we tend to pick up one end of the stick and we don't necessarily like the other end of the stick, right? We call these mistakes. So mistakes are choices that we've made that we wouldn't really want to like, that if we could do over again, we would change that. For example, getting a little bit vulnerable here, I've been thinking about my summer goals and stuff, and I want to head out in March to start selling, but I'm also in school right now. So my original plan in January was to crank out school, so do 2 modules per week per class and get all of school done before January, or at least like a good majority of it. Well, as it turns out, it's now February 15th, 16th, and like I am like right on schedule. There are some classes that I'm still ahead in, but it's just catching up to me. Like I have assignments due this week when I should be like almost done with the semester. And so I picked up one end of the stick, which wasn't focusing on homework. And the natural consequence was that I didn't get my homework done. And now I'm having to catch up to where I would like to be big time. So it's like a mistake that I feel, right? That like really hurts and like goes deep inside because it just shows like a lack of like vision, a lack of like integrity, a lack of commitment on my part. And I like, so like, those are like the natural consequences to my character are like, not only am I not getting my homework done, but I'm also like seeing this lack of commitment, right? But then I have to realize that although that does fill me with like this feeling of regret and like remorse of conscience, as a proactive person, I can't dwell on that. But I choose to respond in a way to learn from it, or first to acknowledge it, right? I have to acknowledge I actually did it, which I basically just did. And then to actually like learn from it and to correct it, right? And so that's what I mean by that. It's like weekly planning resume, or even like doing my statement of definite purpose, which I have not been doing. And so like all those things are things that I can be doing to set my priorities straight and to manage my time more effectively, right? And so like that's the proactive approach. Stephen Covey says here, success, said IBM founder T.J. Watson, is on the far side of a failure. Sometimes we make these mistakes, these first order mistakes, Now he goes into talking about this second order mistake, which is actually a very fascinating idea. To where when we acknowledge that we made a mistake, right? The bigger mistake is not correcting it, not learning from it, not acknowledging it. That is actually the bigger mistake. Is not necessarily responding to it, just kind of like letting it ride, right? So just to kind of like read this to you, he says, but not to acknowledge a mistake, not to correct it and learn from it is a mistake of a different order. It usually puts a person on a self-deceiving, self-justifying path, often involving rationalization, rational lies to self and to others. This second mistake, this cover-up, empowers the first, giving it disproportionate importance and causes far deeper injury to self. It is not what others do or even our own mistakes that hurt us the most. It is our response to those things. Kind of a cool idea to where like the second order has way more impact on our lives. If we change our circumstances based on a previous mistake that we have learned from, it's actually like a good thing. Like we're pushing forward, we're progressing in our lives. It's like kind of the whole purpose of life is to gain experience and progress, right? And so we can use these mistakes to do that, but when we don't respond in a proactive manner and we don't change things, then we're actually making a bigger mistake in not responding to those or not changing and learning from and correcting our mistakes, right? I was talking with my director of sales like a week or two ago, and he was talking to me about this idea of like self-respect. Like if I learn something and I know it to be true, like I should have like the self-respect to not break myself against that principle anymore, right? So if I make a mistake on the doors and realize that line doesn't work, or that like order of tonalities or that body language doesn't work, like I should respect myself enough to not do it anymore. I should respect my time and the other homeowners' time, and to like not do that anymore. And I'm like slowly like realizing that principle is like way true, especially in this part on the other end of the stick, right? And so like our response to any mistake is going to affect how like the next hours are going to be, or even the next minutes or seconds. And we need to choose to be proactive about that response. Like how are we responding to our mistakes that we're making? Because if we don't respond in a positive way, that's an even bigger mistake, right? And like if we don't do that, like immediately admit it and correct our mistakes, then they're just going to keep having power over us moment from moment to moment, and we're going to end up not where we want to be, which essentially is kind of what I'm realizing right now. And I am really excited to act proactively and to change that by weekly planning and doing my statement of definite purpose again. Plus a lot of other things, but those are the two in particular, because if I do those, then I will do everything else. So yeah, there's that, guys. Really excited to be able to talk about this more with you tomorrow with the story from today. So I appreciate it, and love you guys. See you on the side.